Two by-election losses, a looming budget fight, and lots of chatter about an election on the horizon. Just another day at the office for Ontario's 25th Premier, who celebrated, if that's the right word, her first year in office last week. For some reflections on that year, and some other stuff as well, here's Premier Kathleen Wynne, the MPP for Don Valley West, and we welcome you back to TVO.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Pleasure to see you again.
And I did celebrate a year.
You did celebrate?
We did. It was, there were lots of people who said we wouldn't be standing after a year, and I was determined to make the minority parliament work. We did. We had an interesting year, lots of action, and here we are.
Let me ask you about the week. We'll get to the year. I want to ask you about the week, because earlier this week, the leader of the NDP, Andrea Horwath, wrote you a letter saying, the NDP will no longer support your government if the upcoming budget includes, and I want to get the quote exact, any new taxes, tolls, or fees that hit middle-class families. What do you understand that to mean?
Well, what I understand it to mean is that the NDP are not supportive of a plan to build transit. And that worries me, because it seems to me that all parties in the legislature, but particularly the NDP, should understand how important it is that we invest in infrastructure, and in order to do that we need a revenue stream to do that. So I completely understand the challenges around families, that families are feeling squeezed, and that anything that we do has to be fair, but we absolutely have to continue to build transit. It's costing us billions of dollars a year in productivity because people can't move around the GTHA. We know that communities in other parts of the province need support in infrastructure as well. So to me, it seems like a self-evident fact that we have to continue to build infrastructure in the province.
I understand that position. I understand what she is saying. Are your two positions irreconcilable?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're going to bring forward a budget. We're going to have a plan for building transit. As I said, we're going to propose a fair plan. We haven't landed on exactly what the revenue stream will look like, but my hope would be that the opposition parties would see that it was a necessary plan and that it was worthwhile to support. But I can't control that. All I can control is that we bring forward a plan that I think is in the best interest of the people of the province. That's my job.
But I guess what I'm wondering is, does one of you have to change your position somewhat in order to avert an election? Can you both can't be on the same page on this, can you?
Well, I guess not. And in terms of my commitment to build transit and my commitment to bring forward a revenue stream. Now, I believe that she's focusing on a few of the potential tools. I don't know whether she's considered the full range, and that's what remains to be seen. I've also this week sent a letter both to Tim Hudak and to Andrea Horwath, asking them to comment on the budget, to meet with me if they choose to, and we'll see if that happens.
I keep looking at this line though, and I'm really parsing here. I'm trying to find whether there's wiggle room, and the line is any new taxes, tolls, or fees that hit middle-class families. Yeah. And I wonder whether you can infer from that as long as the tax, toll, or fee is not new, or maybe if it only hits high-income people, right, that's an out.
Well,
did you read it that way?
Well, and that's what I mean. I don't think we've had enough of an exchange to establish exactly what the parameters would be. But I'm not going to be in a position where we're going to be writing a budget in order to fit within the NDP's parameters or the Tories' parameters. I'm happy to work. I'm happy to work with them. I'm happy for us to work to find common ground as we did last year. But we're going to bring forward our ideas, and they are going to be based on what we believe is in the best interest of the province. And right now, Steve, I think that is about investing in people. It's investing in people. It's investing in infrastructure. Transit obviously is part of that, and it's creating a business environment that's going to allow investment to come to Ontario and businesses to thrive. This is not the moment I believe, to either cut and slash, which is what Tim Hudak would do, and it's not the moment to not have a plan and not have a stand on, not take a stand on those very important long-term issues. I mean, look, whether it's transit, so the leader of the leader of the third party, Andrea Horwath, is saying that what she doesn't believe in terms of building transit. She hasn't taken a position on minimum wage and indexing minimum wage to inflation. She hasn't taken a position on retirement security and the need to enhance retirement pension plans. So, you know, the fact that we don't know where the NDP stands on all of those things is that's their position. That, I guess, is working politically for them, but it is not. I know that's the next.
You know, that's my next question right here, which is the less she says, the higher her numbers go. Their numbers haven't been this high in 25 years.
I would suggest that as we move into this budget round and potentially closer to a provincial, a general election, people are going to have to look at the options. They're going to have to look at, you know, are we going to cut and slash and go back to a period of time where, when Tim Hudak was in government previously and under another premier, he was part of a cabinet that really slashed public services. Are people going to take a risk on an NDP that seems to be very different from the NDP of the past and hasn't taken positions on issues that we would have expected them to take issues, and really trust the economy with that kind of risky lack of a plan? Or are they going to look at the plan that we're putting forward, which has been very clear for the last 12 months, will continue to be clear, and look at this as a time for investment in the economy?
I don't want to talk too much. I mean, we do mostly policy here. I don't want to talk too much politics and strategy. However, since you did just try to associate Tim Hudak with Mike Harris, which I get that you guys are going to do that, isn't that a bit risky? Because then people are going to want to try to attach you with everything Dalton McGuinty is responsible for.
You know what? I really am saying that what Tim Hudak is saying right now that he would do is not different from what he did before. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not attaching him to a particular person. I mean, others can extrapolate from that.
This isn't the Harris-Hudak government?
No, what he's suggesting is that cutting programs and slashing across government is what should happen now. I don't believe that's the case.
Can I get you to confirm here today that you will introduce a budget?
That is absolutely our intention. Yes, we're in the process of writing a budget.
So for sure, you will introduce a budget. You see what I'm getting at here? Because I'm guessing you've got some hawks in your office who are saying, you know, let's go through the process of writing a budget, but the fact is you probably just ought to go to the LG, have them call an election, let's get going.
I have no intention of doing that. We are working very hard
to develop. That's leaving a bit of door open, though. You'll acknowledge that. Well, you are.
You know what? A week is a long time in politics.
A lifetime.
It's a lifetime. But we have no intention of doing that. We're writing a budget. We're getting ready to bring that budget to the legislature, and that's our plan.
You have been Premier for 53 weeks.
Yes.
I said off the opening, some people didn't think you'd be Premier for 53 days, but here you are. There is nothing in our Constitution or in our tradition that obliges you to seek, quote unquote, your own mandate. But new premiers, at some point, want to. Do you feel you need your own mandate yet?
I believe that it's very important for me to follow through on what I said I was going to do, which is to work to make the minority parliament work. I've done that for a year. And as I say, we're going to introduce a budget. This is a really important moment in terms of the economic recovery of the province. I've traveled to 105 of the 107 ridings in the last year. I've Skyped into the other two. So I've touched every region of the province, Steve, and people are very concerned that there be a steady hand on the tiller, that the economy be allowed to recover with the support of government, and that government make the choices that are going to allow for their kids to have jobs, for their parents to have the care that they need.
So that argues for staying in longer.
Well, it argues for stability. It argues for making sure that there's a plan that has been tested and is steady and predictable. So that's the work that we're doing.
Do you feel a year is sufficient time for people to get to know who you are and what your priorities are?
Well, I have done my utmost to be accessible and to let people know who I am. I think that the reality is that there are still lots of people in the province who don't know me because I have only been in this role for a year. And so I will continue to travel and continue to try to connect with people. You know, I believe that election campaigns, should there be an election campaign, shine a certain kind of light on all of the leaders and all of the parties, and so campaigns have a life of their own. But I will continue to do my utmost to connect with people across the province.
To that end, we haven't had a chance to talk to you here in this set since the by-elections, and I do want to ask you about them. In Thornhill, your vote was pretty much the same as in the 2011 general election. In Niagara Falls, you lost almost half your votes. Do you know why?
By-elections have their own dynamic, as I've said many times, and so I think there were different factors at play in Niagara Falls and in Thornhill. I think that some of the federal issues played much more in Thornhill than previously. I think that in Niagara there was there's a certain sense of it being a town that was looking for a different kind of member, and that's as it is. We had really strong candidates. Joyce Morocco in Niagara Falls is such a community leader, and she has worked so hard. Well, that's what I'm saying. So it wasn't about our candidates, because Sandra Young Racco in Thornhill and Joyce Morocco are exemplary community leaders. So I think there were other dynamics going on, and as I've also said, we can't extrapolate from those by-elections onto a general election.
Sure, but having said that, again, I don't want to get too wrapped up in polls here, but the polls clearly show that you have still a very strong connection to people in the 416 in Toronto. Outside the 416, not so much. What do you think is not happening outside of Toronto that has so far prevented you from making that kind of connection with voters?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think one of them is what you said previously. People know me better in this region. I mean, in the Toronto region. That's a reality. But I think the other thing is, and this is what some of the recent polls have shown, and we all know, this notion of change. You know, that people want change. And as I said in my remarks on by-election night, I am change. You know, I've only been here for a year, and I'm a different person than my previous boss, and I'm taking different directions. We're tackling different issues. So that may not be as well known outside of the GTHA as it is within the GTHA. One of the reasons that I took on the role of Minister of Agriculture and Food was to make it clear to people that agriculture, rural communities, small towns are a priority for us as a government, because I think there'd been a notion that had crept into the political discussion that somehow we were a government that only cared about the urban centres.
Well, that's where all your seats are.
But that's just not true. You know, it's just not true that that's all we care about, because we have spent millions, billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars supporting the agri-food industry. We will spend more. We will put more supports in place. And the rural Ontario is extremely important to us as a government. Northern Ontario is important. I mean, the Ring of Fire is a huge opportunity for this province. There's a national interest, I would suggest, in developing that chromite and mineral deposit. So we are not, in terms of our focus and our policy agenda, only an urban party. That would be, first of all, irresponsible for any government in Ontario to be that, but we are particularly not that. I'm not sure that's as well known as it should be. Okay, little housekeeping here. You said when you became Premier, I'm going to stay Agriculture Minister for a year. Year's up. Are you giving up the job? You know what? I'm not. I'm not giving it up. I'm going to hold on to it. There's some things that I want to see through. I've put a challenge out to the agri-food industry to basically double the number of jobs by 2020. Not that I'm suggesting I would be Minister of Agriculture till 2020, but I do think that I want to see those projects get going. I want to see some of the investments in the local food from the local food fund, because I really believe that improving our selling of local food will support the agri-food industry. So there's some things that I need to do. And quite frankly, I've had many people from the agriculture sector say to me, we like the profile that agriculture and food have gotten because you're the Premier. There's a different discussion around the cabinet table because I'm Minister of Agriculture and Food. I was hearing the opposite a year ago. A year ago I was hearing she's going to be Premier and Ag Minister. We'll never get to see her. Well, and what I'm saying is that I've had many individual farmers and leadership of organizations say to me, we like the profile that the sector's getting.
Okay. I want to follow up a bit on this issue that there's that Obama line, you are the change we've been looking for. Because you, yes, are a change from the previous First Minister of the province, but you as a Liberal do not represent change. You guys have been in for 10 years. And there are, I don't have to tell you, lots of people in this province who are desperate to get rid of you guys. They think 10 years is enough. And, we can go through the whole litany of the reasons why, the gas plants in eHealth and Orange, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to continue to be Premier, I presume you're going to have to get a certain chunk of that group of citizens who at the moment are desperate to get rid of you to give you a second look. Mm-hmm. What can you say to them?
So this is the second part of my point about change, which is I understand the desire for change. I do. I understand that. I also understand that once we have a more in-depth conversation about change, we have to ask change for change's sake or change to something that we really want. And so that's why people have to look at the three parties and have to say, well, what is it that we're changing to? And I know there's a truism about Ontario politics that parties get voted out as opposed to voted in. And I get that. But I also believe that we can't underestimate the people of the province by suggesting that blind change for change's sake is what they would look for. So what I'm saying is look very hard at the three of us. Look very hard at what it is we're bringing. I'm saying right now that there's a very negative cut and slash agenda that's coming from the Conservatives. From us, you're seeing a plan that is being implemented, that is creating jobs, that is stable and believes in investment in people. And from the NDP, there's no plan.
But I'm going to guess, again, I hate to talk too much strategy here, but I'm going to guess that 31% that support the Progressive Conservative Party are bedrock. There's nothing you're going to say to them that's going to get them to take a second look at you. So my hunch is you got to go over to where the NDP is and try and convince some of them to, if I can put it this way, come home. Because that's where you've lost the support.
Well, you know what? I'm neither a pollster nor a pundit, so I'm not going to talk about where the swing vote is or where the possibilities are. All I know, Steve, is that when I go into communities, I talk to people who have voted across the spectrum, and I talk to them and ask them about their concerns, and we engage on many of the same issues from town to town and city to city, and so I know that jobs are on people's minds, that they want to be sure that in the creation of jobs and in the fostering of an economic climate, that we don't forget that fairness is an issue, that healthcare and education are the two biggest things that we do as government, and they're critical to a fair society. So I hear those things from people, and so the policies that we bring forward, the budget that we're going to bring forward, those ideas are going to be reflected in those policies and in the budget.
As always, the clock ticks way too quickly on this program. We got a minute left, and I want to ask you this one last thing. Complete the following sentence for me, Premier, if you would. Now that I've been Premier for a year, I understand so much better what?
I understand so much better the breadth and diversity of the province. I also understand so much better the need to speak to, I talked about One Ontario when I first came into this job, but I understand so much better now what that means, that it is imperative that we act and understand that this is one province that needs its diversity recognized. And so that's the challenge, that's the tension of being the Premier of Ontario, and it's a huge honor and a huge challenge all at the same time.
And we thank you for coming into TVO tonight to talk about it.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.